Welcome to Unit 10 of the Georgia Department of Transportation's mandated modules for school bus drivers. This unit is on accident procedures. Our objective for this session is to teach the driver the proper procedures in the event of an accident. Our performance standards are that the driver should be knowledgeable of the procedures that are to be taken in the event of an accident. So our overview, you're going to learn the responsibilities of the driver in relationship to the bus, the driver, the students, the other vehicles, and the school district itself. Why is this important? Safety. As a professional driver with the critical role of child safety, handling proper procedure in the event of an accident can literally be the difference in life and death. Knowing a driver has the ability and knowledge, through training, to handle any type of accident will help give confidence when needed in this event. To make sure that you're equipped. Being well equipped in case of an accident is something a good driver does twice a day, every day during their pre-trip inspection. Reassuring yourself that first aid and body fluid kits, as well as emergency reflectors and fire extinguishers, are accessible will give added relief and confidence to the driver. And to mitigate damages. Knowing procedure could very well minimize damages and liability for the drivers as well as for the school system. The initial process in case of an accident. Stop immediately. Stop at the site of the accident. A quick assessment will be needed to determine if the bus must be moved for safety measures. Activate your hazard lights. Activating the hazards will alert all surrounding traffic of an unusual situation and will help in preventing additional situations. This action is immediate. Set the parking brake. This action will prevent the bus from moving and allow the driver to move about the bus as needed. Turn off your ignition. Drivers should stop running the motor either by key or kill switch. Place the key in the accessory position, enabling driver to use the radio. And finally, secure the key. The driver should secure the key in the event of an evacuation. Accident procedures. Whether minor or a serious incident, the driver must remain calm. Speaking clearly into the radio will expedite needed response. Screaming will frighten students. The driver, being the only adult in the bus in most cases, is who the students are putting all their trust. Reassure the students. Calmly reassure students things will be okay. Give basic instructions, that is, stay seated, look around for your neighbor, is everyone accounted for, is anyone hurt? And then check for injuries. Walk through the bus checking for student injuries and worries. Okay, question. Upon an accident, what 5 procedures will be taken in securing the bus? Stop immediately. Activate your hazard lights. Set your parking brake. Turn off the bus. And secure your keys. Calling for assistance. Notify your supervisor immediately. Immediately after securing the bus, the driver will call the supervisor with the necessary information to expedite needs. Discussion of the accident will not take place over the radio. Make sure you provide the bus number. Clearly inform the supervisor with the bus number. Accident location. Always be aware of your location. Be aware of landmarks, intersections, road names on a daily basis so you're prepared for the unexpected. Exercise this in your personal vehicle as well, which will help you form a habit that may save a life. Time could be of the essence. Is medical assistance necessary? Assess and evaluate injuries. Do you need 911? Let the supervisor know. Minor scratches or bumps or just shook up, it may be determined that the driver can handle these medical situations. And then spare bus needs. Evaluate if another bus will be necessary to continue transportation. This may be difficult to determine. Arriving personnel from transportation can make that determination. At the accident scene, protect the scene. Do not move the vehicle until approved. Make note if other vehicle is moved. Critical decisions must be prioritized. Ask about injuries. Be aware of location of the accident. Can other oncoming vehicles see you? Make the assignments to students if necessary. That is, get a name list, have a student sit with another who may be upset, solicit help. Set out the warning devices. The driver will be protecting the scene by placing the emergency devices in front of and behind the driver's side of the bus at the proper distances. Place the warning devices within 10 minutes of an accident if possible. Hold the device between yourself and the oncoming traffic when placing. You may also have another motorist place the devices. The proper placement depends upon the road layout. On a two-way straightaway, there should be one placed in the front 100 feet from the bus, one and then two to the rear, one 10 feet and one 100 feet behind the bus. If it's a one-way divided highway, there should be all three of them placed to the rear, one at 10 feet, one at 100, and one at 200 feet. If it's an obstructed view, the placement may vary, but usually you'll be looking at all three of the devices placed behind the bus. Vehicle movement. Code 40-6-275 directs the drivers of any vehicles involved in an accident to move the vehicles to a safe location off the roadway as long as it does not endanger the safety of any people. Make sure that your students are not in danger. Use common sense. If you're on an unsafe location like a railroad track, bus movement is essential. If there is broken glass around a student, move the student to a safer seat. On the other hand, if you believe a student may have incurred a spinal injury, try not to touch the student. When the location is safe, administer first aid if necessary. And always make sure that you do not admit fault to anyone. Outside the law enforcement officer, the driver should refer all persons to the school district for requested comments. Some follow-up questions here. After securing the bus and checking on students, you will need to call for assistance, protect the scene, and give first aid as needed. Smoke and fire. Be alert to smoke and fire or the possibility of fire. Check for smoke itself. Err on the side of safety in determining evacuation. A ruptured fuel tank. Driver must step off the bus for effective evaluation. Leaking fuel lines. Again, the driver must step off the bus for an effective evaluation. Electrical fire. Smell is apparent. If that's the case, evacuate. Only after evacuation and students are safely located, make the transportation aware. Carry the first aid kit, student list, and cell phone. Recommended distance for safety is a minimum of 3 bus lengths away from the bus. Injuries. Students with serious injuries should be given attention by the driver. An assigned student should radio the supervisor. The driver should remember to use the gloves. Do not come into contact with another's body fluid. Remember universal precautions. For movement of the injured should never be moved if there is known neck, head, back, or internal injuries. Apparent impending danger will require a critical decision. Discuss this with your school district, and it must be considered on a case-by-case basis. Perform first aid if it is within the scope of your training. Student location. Keep students on the bus unless there is a possibility of fire. Remove the students immediately to a safe location with the thought of impending explosion. Another collision. Is there a potential additional collision? If so, if it's possible, if the original accident happened on the highway, a busy intersection, or a curve, or an unlit area, students should be quickly relocated. Is there danger of drowning? If the accident happened near a bridge or an embankment, students should be carefully evacuated. Know your evacuation procedures. Evacuation drills are mandatory and implemented twice a year every school year, one in the fall and one in the spring. Remember, there are 9 to 10 exits on every school bus. 4 emergency windows, 2 roof hatches, a front door, a back door. The front driver window can also be kicked out, and a possible side door may exist. Evacuation can be done with 1 exit at a time in an emergency. Refer to Unit 11 of the Georgia Department of Education mandated units. Be prepared. Provide 2 lists of students with the names, the address, and the birth date. Hopefully you'll have a current list of student names on the bus, and all you have to do is check them off. If there's a student on the bus at the time and you don't have their name, go ahead and write it down. The address and birth date information can usually be obtained later by your supervisor. Make sure that you have a bus insurance card. All vehicles, including buses, should have a valid insurance card readily available. It's required in an accident and may also be needed at random checkpoints, sometimes set up for various reasons. And finally, get witness names, any names of any witnesses that could be of help. Releasing students is not to be done unless directed to do so by the supervisor. Although the driver may know the parent or person who wishes to obtain the student, the driver can only do so with consent of the school district. For injuries, check for injuries in the other vehicles. The students are the driver's first priority, but scan the scene to determine whether medical assistance is needed for others outside the bus. Use the radio to communicate the needs. When in doubt, ask for medical assistance. Code 40-6-270.3 says that you are to render to any person injured in such an accident reasonable assistance, including the transportation or making of arrangements for transporting of such person to a physician, surgeon, or hospital for medical or surgical treatment, if it is apparent that such treatment is necessary, or if such transporting is requested by the injured person. The driver shall in every event remain at the scene of the accident until fulfilling the requirements of that law. So make sure that anybody who has an injury is given assistance and medical attention is called for. Notification. Notify the district designee. For most school districts, that's going to be the dispatcher, but it may also be a supervisor or some other designated person within the school district. They will in turn contact the appropriate persons and agencies, including law enforcement, medical emergency, and other school administrators. Okay, some questions here. Blank is required to release students. Simply put, approval. It is not up to the driver to do that. The driver must get approval from the designated school officials in order to release students. Who would determine the release of the students? It would be the school district official along with permission from the police. The facts. Do not discuss the facts of the accident with parents, bus drivers, or friends. Depending on the location of the accident, a driver may be surrounded by people they may know. It is the driver's best interest not to discuss the situation with anyone outside of their supervisor or law enforcement. Remember, remain calm and remain quiet. Also, do not discuss it with the media. Wait for law enforcement and transportation officials to arrive at the scene. A designated person will handle all communications with the media and other agencies, and will also discuss it within the system. This process is for the driver's protection. There is a danger in talking to the media as a driver. A driver's comments may be misconstrued, which may make a party look inadequate. When trying to be interviewed, know your answer in advance. It is always going to be the same. All comments should be addressed to the system's public relations spokesperson or the superintendent. These people are experienced and paid to know how to give the most accurate information on behalf of the system. This is a time when it is okay to pass the buck. Giving information. This law basically requires any investigating officer to request certain information and for the motorist involved to provide the information. They must specifically provide the driver's license, vehicle information, and proof of insurance. Simply put, cooperate with the investigating officer by providing the information requested and giving a straightforward answer to all questions. Comments. Do not place blame for the accident or make an admission of liability. The decision will be made by law enforcement agencies. Providing information. Provide accident information only to investigating officers and the Transportation Department's representative. The list of information should include the student's name, age, and address. The driver can provide the names, and the supervisor can get access to the ages and addresses of each student involved if this becomes necessary. The bus driver needs to be prepared at all times with information documenting insurance covering the bus make and model, and numbers as well as the owner's name. Witnesses. If witnesses are present other than your students, obtain the name, address, license number, and phone number. Do not leave your students unattended. If the witness is willing to remain on the scene, the police officer will gather the information along with the witness's statement. Some review questions here. True or false? We should explain our accident to the general public if asked. The answer is false. Leave that up to designated officials. True or false? We should provide accident information to officers and school officials as well as the person of the struck vehicle. The answer to that is true. Remember, with the other motorist, be diplomatic. Make sure the other motorist is okay, and use the police officer as a liaison. True or false? Placing blame is okay initially. We're all human and it's a natural reaction. Absolutely false. Do not place blame, and do not accept liability either. True or false? Name, addresses, license, and phone numbers should be obtained from witnesses. That's true, if it's safe to do so. Continuing transportation. Continue the transport of students when authorized to do so. Students should be transported by the present bus if released, or by another bus brought to the scene. Student transfer from bus to bus should be done in the safest manner possible. Someone from transportation can assist the driver in this process. Placing the doors of the two buses as close as possible would be the best scenario. Reporting accidents. Report all accidents to your supervisor. Proper forms will need to be filled out. These forms may differ from one school district to the other. Forms could possibly include workers' compensation, student injury, as well as the accident form itself. Remember, if you are given a citation while driving your personal vehicle, this must also be reported in a timely manner to transportation as well. The supervisor will report to the local system. The supervisor will forward forms filled out by the driver for the record. The local system will report electronically to the Georgia Department of Education. The Georgia Department of Education will receive all reports. These reports are available for a nationwide statistical summary. Help Georgia reduce accident and fatalities by improving the current record. And finally, the law outlines when an accident must be reported to a local law enforcement agencies. If you hit a mailbox, it may have to be reported. So, report all collisions to the Transportation Department immediately so they can ensure compliance to the law. Property damage. Other type of accidents. Do you consider these accidents? They are, no matter how big or small, bus to bus, mailbox, tree, fences, utility poles, school awning, grass, curbing, flower beds, fire hydrants, and road grades. Every one of these examples is extremely preventable. Be patient, learn to use mirrors properly, know the road grade, and do not take unnecessary chances. The driver's inability. The driver is physically unable to carry out duties. Prior preparation for unseen accidents where the driver is unable to carry out duties would involve training or instructing proper procedures to a preferred student. This training should include setting the parking brake and opening the front door. It may also involve how to use the radio. Prior written parental consent may be required. Discuss this issue with your school district. The driver's selection of the student helper. In choosing a student helper, mature judgment, leadership abilities, capable, responsible, and assist would be qualities to consider. Alcohol and drug testing. Post-accident and alcohol testing. Drivers are governed by 3 laws. Basically, the federal law, which is the Omnibus Transportation Employee Testing Act of 1991, also a Georgia law, and there's also regulations under the Georgia Board of Education rules. These laws require that an accident involving a school district bus require the driver to be drug and alcohol tested if the accident involves a fatality or if the bus driver is issued a citation and either a vehicle is towed or a person is transported to the hospital. School districts may have additional requirements. Here we have an example of a county's post-accident decision tree. Basically, what you see in this is what the federal law dictates. Again, anytime there is a fatality, no matter who may be at fault, the CDL holder must be tested. If the CDL holder is issued a citation, then we look at additional questions. If either a person had to be transported from the scene or a vehicle had to be towed, then testing must take place. You see in this particular school district's requirement, they've added some additional things down in the bottom. If the driver is injured, even if he doesn't have to be transported from the scene, they require that the driver be tested for workers' comp purposes. Also, if there's property damage of a certain level, they would require it under their Drug-Free Workplace Act. Okay, review questions here. To whom would you report your accident? Your dispatcher and your supervisor. Always report to whomever the school district designates. Should the driver be unable to fulfill obligations in an accident situation, to whom should the driver look? The most capable and responsible student. By the way, you may also ask for help from bystanders as long as they are not left alone with the students. In summary, the primary responsibility of the driver is the safety and security of the students. Although you want to be helpful to all parties involved, your first and foremost responsibility is to the students in your care. It is paramount that the driver knows the procedures. The driver's lack of knowledge could be very damaging to themselves and the students. The driver increases the risk of liability, further damage, and simply their own credibility by not knowing procedures. Knowledge is power, and knowledge helps dissipate stress and alarm, which in turn helps expedite needs. It could be a life saved. Our measure of performance standard. Hopefully our drivers will not have to perform, but we must be prepared at all times. Prepare a booklet for each bus stating step-by-step procedures in the event of an accident. This booklet can be read during a short layover to keep fresh on procedures. The book can highlight other event procedures as well, such as tornadoes or downed electrical wires. A one-sheet verbiage covering needed information would be adequate. Having something within reach is the goal. How do you apply this training? As you are on the road with your trainer, discuss accident procedures and consider different accident scenarios. Thank you for your attention to this unit. This is Unit 11 of the Georgia Department of Education mandated units. This one is on emergency evacuations. Knowing what, when, and why you should evacuate a bus is very important to the safety of your passengers. Let's spend some time to cover what you'll need to know about emergency evacuations. Our objective is to teach the procedures that should be followed in evacuating a bus in case of an emergency. Our performance standards. When you have finished this unit, you should know the reasons to evacuate a school bus and the procedures for the 3 types of emergency evacuation drills. Emergency evacuation overview. You're going to learn the reasons to evacuate, the factors to consider in evacuating, and ways to evacuate the bus in an emergency. Why is it important? Making the decision to evacuate or not is a critical issue, and you should be able to analyze and execute your decision in the shortest reaction time possible. Performing practice evacuation procedures will substantially improve your ability to get the passengers off in a safe and efficient manner. Reasons to evacuate. There are several reasons why you might execute an emergency evacuation of your school bus. In the event you detect a fire or danger of fire, the bus should be stopped and evacuated immediately. Students should be moved to a safe place at least 100 feet or more from the bus. The presence of leaking gasoline or other combustible material should be considered as danger of fire and a possible need to evacuate. In the event that your bus is stopped due to an accident, mechanical failure, or some road condition or human failure, you must determine immediately whether it is in a safe position for students to remain on the bus or to get them off. In the event you find yourself stopped in the path of any train or adjacent to any railroad tracks, you must evacuate. The student should move away from the tracks and toward the approaching train to keep from being in the path of the movement of the collision. You could be forced to evacuate if there is danger of collision from other vehicles. Normally, you should have at least 500 feet visibility of approaching traffic in either direction. And finally, the danger of conditions changing after a bus is in a stop position is ever present. If, for example, a bus should come to rest near a body of water or precipice, where it could still move and go into the water or over a cliff, it should be evacuated. Fire or danger of fire. It is important that you know that a bus will be engulfed in flames in 3 minutes. Time is important, and practice is important to all students. Unsafe position. There is always that possibility of having to stop the bus in an unsafe position. There may not be enough room on the shoulder, or the shoulder of the road is unstable or steep. Again, a decision to evacuate or not is facing you. Railroad. When the bus stops on or near the tracks, you should evacuate. Students should move away from the track and toward the approaching train to keep from being in the path of danger. Danger of a collision. When you are within 15 feet of the nearest rail of a railroad track, you should make a decision to evacuate the bus. There should be a clear view of the bus from approaching traffic at least 500 feet away on a 2-lane road. Changing conditions. The weather can be a challenge. There could be a situation where the weather creates an unsafe condition to drive. Again, you must make that decision to evacuate or stay put. The burden of a decision to make an emergency evacuation is always on the driver. As we say, you are the captain of your ship. How far should students move away from the bus? You should have the students practice going 100 feet. That's 40 steps at a child's pace, or about 3 lengths of a school bus. Where should you practice? Always be on school property when practicing. Find a fixed object and use it as your 100-foot marker for a rendezvous point. When do you practice? Practice at least twice a year and always try to arrange it in advance. It should be done during school hours and utilize school staff to assist in supervision. Who should participate in the practice? All students at all schools should be included in emergency evacuation practice. Not all students ride the bus on a regular basis, but most students ride the bus on occasional field trips. Actually, you may arrange the practice prior to an activity trip or a field trip. That way you know that you're covering all of the students. Safe bus riding practices, including emergency evacuations, may be part of the curriculum at each of the schools. This is probably the most effective way of instilling the importance of the emergency evacuation drills. Now let's look at some questions. Name the 5 reasons to evacuate a school bus. Fire or danger of fire, unsafe position, stopping on or near a railroad crossing, danger of a collision, and changing conditions. Next question is, how far should students be evacuated away from the bus? Practice going 100 feet. In an emergency, you may not be able to go 100 feet safely, or you may go farther if conditions warrant. Next question. To avoid a collision, how far should a stopped bus be visible? A stopped bus should be visible at least for 500 feet. Should you evacuate? Only if it's safer for the students to be off the bus. Some important factors. There are several important factors you should consider about emergency evacuations. Of course, the key issue here is the safety of the students. Make sure that drills are supervised. You're asking for trouble if they're not. It is vitally important that helpers be properly trained. The drill will run smoother and make more sense if they are. Get permission for helpers in writing if necessary. You do not want to surprise their parents after an incident. And students should leave personal items such as book bags, lunch boxes, science projects, etc. The extra stuff slows down the evacuation. We want the students to get the message that they are more important than their belongings. Other important factors. Helpers should be good citizens. They need to be mature, and they need to ride most of the route. If your helper has gotten off at the first stop, he will not be much of a help in an emergency. What should helpers know? In case of an emergency, your helpers should know how to turn off the engine. The driver may be incapacitated, and the helper should know some basic things about the bus, like how to set the parking brake. If the driver is unable to stop the bus, it is important that the helpers know how. They also need to know how to use the radio. It is hard to help someone if you don't know that they have a problem. It is important that someone communicate the location and the conditions in the emergencies. Helpers should also know how to open and close the doors. There is no point in practicing an evacuation if you don't know how to get out of the bus. If the doors are blocked or damaged, helpers should know how to open emergency exits. Helpers should practice opening and closing emergency exit doors, windows, and roof hatches. It's also a good idea to make these exits off limits to the students. You may want to insist that emergency windows not be opened at all except in an emergency, and you should demonstrate. Helpers should also know how to help students off the bus. Front door evacuations don't require a lot of helping, but rear door evacuations do. Make sure one of the helpers is responsible for counting students as they exit, and the other counts them as they arrive at the rendezvous point. Let's look at some additional study questions. What is the most important consideration for evacuation of the bus? Only if it is safer for the students to get off the bus. Name 3 qualities of helpers. The qualities of the helpers are good citizens, mature, and ride most of the route. Now let's discuss 3 basic emergency exit drills. The front door evacuation, the rear door evacuation, and a combination of the front and rear door evacuation. We'll talk first about the front door evacuation. It should be practiced first before attempting the rear door evacuation. Before you start the drill, tell the students what you're about to do. Practice an emergency evacuation through the front door. Tell them that you expect the drill to be taken seriously with no horseplay, and that it should be done as quickly and as safely as possible. Point out all the exit points, including how to kick out the windshield if necessary. Demonstrate how to open the exit windows, the rear door, and roof hatches. Tell the students who your helpers are and what they are going to do. One helper should be stationed at the front door to count students as they exit and to direct them to the rendezvous point. Another helper should be stationed at the rendezvous point to count the students as they arrive and to be the rallying point. In an emergency, these helpers are to assist other students if necessary in getting out of the bus. It is important that every student on the bus know what their role is in evacuation. They are to remain quiet, orderly, and stay in a single line to the rendezvous point. The helpers will compare their counts of students in the drill. Any missing students should be accounted for. The driver will give feedback on the performance. After feedback is given to the students, the line should return in reverse order. The last off should be the first on, and the first off should be the last on. It is important that you tell the students to stay in line. You will have more control over them and therefore an orderly evacuation if they comply. Make sure they understand to leave personal items on the bus. The evacuation will be impeded if students try to carry off book bags, lunch boxes, and science projects. It is important that students exit as quickly and as safely as possible. Emphasize there should be no pushing or shoving. Practicing without chaos will make a real evacuation less likely to be a panic situation. And practice drills should be quiet and orderly. Emphasize the need for quiet and that the drill should be taken seriously. Students should remain calm in their seats until it is their turn to go. Again, you are practicing staying calm. Before the evacuation drill begins, ask the students if they have any questions. It is better to clear up uncertainties before you start the clock. An evacuation drill should be completed inside of 3 minutes. Remember the graphic of the burned out bus on slide number 7? Time the exercise from the time you announce front door evacuation until all students are gathered at the rendezvous point. The first time you practice a drill, it may take 3 minutes, but aim for 2 minutes or less. Remember to keep it quiet and orderly. After you have properly prepared the students and answered their questions, you may begin the drill and announce emergency evacuation drill. Exit through the front door, please. Send the helpers to their stations, one by the front door and one about 100 feet away. The driver should begin at the front of the bus, walking backward toward the back of the bus. The driver will indicate to the students in each seat when it is time to get up and get off, alternating from one side of the aisle to the other. It is a good idea for the driver to look back over his shoulder to make sure that students remain in their seats until it is time to go and that they leave personal items on the bus. The driver should meter the flow of evacuees so that the aisle does not have anyone standing still, waiting to get off. This reduces the likelihood of panic and pushing and shoving that goes with it. Monitor the behavior. Allow no horseplay. Talk with students who have a problem obeying any instructions and write disciplinary referrals if necessary. Once it is determined that all students are off, the driver should exit quickly and join the students at the rendezvous point. This is the time for feedback. If the drill can be done faster or more quietly, say so. Try to be as positive as possible. You might say something like, "That was good, but we can do better." Repeat the exercise if necessary. If time is running out that day, try it again the next. Now let's talk about rear door evacuations. Be careful. Practice this with caution. It's a 4-foot drop from the back of the bus. This exercise can best be demonstrated at the completion of the front door evacuation. Before returning to the bus and after feedback for the front door drill, explain to the students that you will demonstrate a rear door evacuation using only your helpers and one other student. Direct the students to the rear of the bus so that they can see the demonstration. Inside the bus, the procedure is very similar to a front door evacuation, except the driver begins at the rear door, opens it, then walks backward toward the front of the bus. Do not allow all of the students to jump out of the back of the bus. Have one student go inside the bus and wait at the rear door for instructions. Station one helper on each side of the rear door and tell the student inside to sit down and place his hands on the shoulders of the helpers. Scoot off the bus, land on both feet, and quickly move out of the way. The combined front and rear door evacuation is the fastest way to empty the bus. You will need 2 additional helpers stationed at the rear door if this drill is practiced. Be careful. If the driver is on the bus directing the evacuation, it will be hard to monitor student behavior at the rear door. Do not attempt a combined front and rear drill until both the front and rear are mastered. Divide the bus so that the front rows go out the front door and the rear rows exit from the rear emergency exit. Monitor student behavior. There is a temptation among immature students to see how far they can jump out the back door or see if they can land on the person in front of them. Before attempting an evacuation with students, each trainee should practice a simulated evacuation using other trainees, instructors, or imaginary students. Before an evacuation becomes necessary, drivers should be on the lookout for possible evacuation sites. Some are better than others, and some should be avoided completely. It would not be a good idea to evacuate to a railroad crossing or to a hazardous business driveway. Now let's review what we've just covered. What are the three basic ways to evacuate? The basic emergency evacuation drills are the front door evacuation, the rear door evacuation, the combined front and rear evacuation. Let's review some of the things that we've learned today. Why is it important that we practice emergency evacuation drills? We discussed the reasons to evacuate: fire or danger of fire, unsafe position, railroad, danger of collision, or changing conditions. We learned about helper duties and procedures. We covered the three basic types of emergency evacuation drills, and we learned how to evacuate a bus. How will you apply this training? The state of Georgia requires that each school bus transporting public school children execute a minimum of 2 emergency evacuation drills per year. In the event of an emergency, the school bus driver is required to evacuate the bus if necessary. You have learned how, when, and where to practice, and how, when, and where to evacuate a bus in case of an emergency. How do we measure the performance? In addition to being able to answer questions on the written test, you may be asked to demonstrate how to perform an actual evacuation. Thanks for your attentiveness to this module.